So they probably thought a celebrity was coming, and that's why they have so many chairs. Unfortunately, it's just the Metropolitan. So I want to ask everybody to get closer to each other. Come forward. Betsy, this is like church. You should sit next to each other. Okay? Come close. If you're in the back, come up. I don't want to, there's no need to be afraid of each other. Unless, then we roast each other. And I think it would be easier, maybe not to have people sitting off to the side in this section. All right, so why don't we all kind of move somehow in the middle? This way I don't have my back to anybody.
All right, good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Nick Cavadas. I'm a parishioner and member of the parish council here at St. Constantine in Helena. On behalf of our parish, I want to welcome all of you and thank you for taking the time to attend this town hall meeting. This marks the final meeting on His Eminence Metropolitan Nathaniel's 2018 listening tour, which has included 12 meetings throughout our metropolis. Before I introduce the Metropolitan, I have a few administrative items. First, if you have not filled out a survey that in the front, please do that and turn it in and we will collect them at the end. In addition, everybody, regardless if you signed up online, should have registered as well on a sheet that looks like this. So if you have not registered, make sure you do it before you leave. If you have one of these, and I'm sure everybody does, it's a cell phone, please turn it off or put it on vibrate. This evening, you will have the opportunity to ask questions to His Eminence. We ask that all questions from the audience be kept short and to the point. Your questions should be in the form of a question. You can also ask a short follow-up question if needed. I also have a few questions that have been handed to me. I will ask in case nobody in the crowd wants to get up or has stage fright. So with that said and done, we are honored tonight to have an opportunity to speak directly with His Eminence Metropolitan Nathaniel. Metropolitan Nathaniel was born in Thessaloniki, Greece, and grew up in New York. He is a graduate of Hellenic College and of Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology. He also earned a Master's of Sacred Theology and a Doctorate of Theology in Bioethics from Boston University. He also studied the history and ethics of public health at Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health. In particular, His Eminence is best known for promoting cooperation and inclusivity. In 2015, His Eminence coordinated the Archdiocesan commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the March on Selma and represented the Archdiocese on the National Council of Churches, Special Task Force to End Racism in America. On March 24th, he was enthroned as the second ever Metropolitan of the Metropolis of Chicago. So please join me in welcoming His Eminence Metropolitan.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you to the parish, Father Ted and Brother George, and everyone here at the community for hosting us this evening, for having a beautiful spread during the meet and greet, and for all of you for coming out from various parts of this part of our metropolis. I haven't been down here all that much. In the beginning, I visited for some of the feast days and for the oratorical festival, so I'm glad that I'm ending the listening tour here in Maryville. Maryville or Cherville? Maryville. Just checking. I usually begin these, and I'll do this for the last time, hopefully, until we do this again. Can you kindly, by a show of hands, just show me how many of you receive direct communications from our metropolis. Anything that comes out of our metropolis, the priest should, right? The priest ought to be receiving. If you're on our mailing list, in other words, our email list, please raise your hand. Okay, how many of you receive them through your parish? So it's shared, a few more receive our information. So just to catch everyone up to speed then, because it seems like not many have seen perhaps or heard what's been happening for the last 5 or 6 months since my arrival in late March. I'd like to give you kind of a summary of some of the things that we've been working on behind the scenes, some of the things that will help us establish a strong foundation for moving forward for years to come. So, as you know, I was elected in February and I got ordained in March, and then I was dropped off in Chicago on March 24th, and they gave me a nice seat. They said, "This is yours now, and these are your people." And so shortly thereafter, we started to kind of begin working. One of the first things that we did was to have a meeting of our members of our Metropolis Council. I met with them, spoke with them. During that meeting, a number of the members submitted their resignation as a gracious act to allow the Metropolitan to consider other members or appointing new members that would work with him in the interim between that time and our next Clergy Laity Assembly. And I asked the rest of the members to also consider doing the same. And indeed, all 24 members submitted their resignation for my consideration. And after about 30 or 40 days of meeting with many of them and meeting with others around the metropolis, I accepted the resignations of all but around 8. So we then had an interim, and we still have an interim Metropolis Council that is serving as my advisory board. That's the role of the Metropolis Council. It's there specifically to advise and help the Metropolitan make the best decisions that he can. We've been working hard. We've already met twice. We have a meeting tomorrow. So in 6 months, the Metropolis Council has already met 3 times. And we have a number of the members of our Metropolis Council here tonight, and I'd like to just mention their names, and if they can stand. And again, I'm going to look around the room and see if I'm missing someone. So we have Father Stephen Bithos from All Saints. We have Deacon Paraskevas Amales. Is there anyone else in the audience that I don't see? No? Okay. So we have a group of 24. 8 of them are members of the clergy, and 16 are lay faithful. We have men and women from around the metropolis, from various parts, that bring various skills and experiences, and they're working closely with me. And the first thing that we did as a Metropolis Council was to establish a delegation of authorities. So instead of all of the authority resting on the shoulders of the Metropolitan, we have officially now a set of rules that govern how we make decisions, including decisions related to legal matters and financial matters. So I have limited authority so that I have checks and balances in place. Depending on the expenditure, we follow a specific formula. At X amount of dollars, the Metropolitan can submit a receipt or a request and make the purchase. At a higher rate, it would require 2 members to approve the executive committee. At a much higher rate, it requires the consensus of our executive committee. At a much higher rate, it requires a Metropolis Council vote, and so forth and so on. And if it's a major acquisition or a major decision, it would require the participation of the entire Clergy Laity Assembly of our metropolis. And again, that's there to protect me, to protect our resources, to make sure that we're not making bad decisions or wrong decisions, but that we have checks and balances and that I get the best advice possible. We also decided to begin a strategic planning process. I think most of you must have, can you show me your hands? Have you heard about our strategic planning process? Raise your hand if you've received any information from your parish. The surveys and participating in the SWOT analysis. Okay, well, not many. So I kindly ask the priests to, if they haven't already, well, there's forms, but please email the material to the parishioners. They have until the 21st or the 20th to submit a SWOT analysis. And it's important to us because we now have a team of about 120 members that are making up the core team. And they will work hard, they will work, we have a workshop coming up in November. But we really are asking each and every one of you to submit a SWOT analysis. It's a small survey. Give us your opinion, give us your feedback. We need to hear from all of you in order to be able to plan our vision for the future. Okay? The strategy for the metropolis is going to be only as good as the people who participate in it. It's going to be as extensive and exhaustive and comprehensive as the amount of people that are participating in it. So I kindly ask you, if you can do it between now and the 20th, go home, fill it out, submit it by email, and your voice will be counted. We are also, we officially signed the agreement just the other day, and we will make a formal announcement. But we are conducting an independent financial audit for the past 3 years of our metropolis. So we, council and I, really, in order to be able to start thinking about the future, we need to understand what we've been doing in the past, where are we falling short, what are we doing well, where can we improve. So we have an independent firm coming in, and they will audit the last 3 years of our finances, and that report will be made public to the entire metropolis. For me to be able to come to you and ask you to help and participate by giving your money and resources, I need you to be confident that we're improving, okay? We will also conduct an independent financial audit of our metropolis St. Iakovos Retreat Center. So that's one of the most important entities that we have as the metropolis. It's the place where we send our kids for summer camp. It's a place where we have many different retreats. And so we want to make sure that we're also doing things correctly there. And when that agreement is signed, you will hear about that. And I would just say lastly, we have a series of 12 committees in place at the metropolis level. These committees are working in the background. Some of them have already begun engaging our parishes and the priests. We have a very important committee called the Baselining Committee that is collecting raw data from our parishes. It will measure everything. It will measure where we are today. Where are we with our stewardship? Where are we with our efforts to evangelize? Where are we with our religious education? How many people do we have? How many people are we losing? How many sacraments do we have? Where a parish is struggling? Okay? And then another committee that's going to come in right after is the Parish Life Committee, which will come in and help find solutions to the problems that parishes are having. How are we going to grow? Where are the needs of each and every parish? They differ from parish to parish, so we have this special committee that once we measure where we are, we will work with parishes to see where we can go. So with that, that's been the last 5 or 6 months. Then the next major phase in our metropolis is the strategic plan, all right, the process, and that will be ready to go and revealed in the fall of 2019, the time when we will have our official Metropolis Clergy Lady Assembly. So stay tuned for more information.
Okay, at this point, thank you. Okay, thanks. Okay, at this point, we'll open the floor for questions. Before we do that, I have quite a few submitted to me. And speaking of the Metropolis Council, I actually have 3 questions relating to the exact same thing. And so I'll read this one. You have made a point to be inclusive and include everyone. Noting that in selecting your Metropolis Board, there is no representation from Northwest Indiana. Was that an oversight or intentional?
That's a good one. Yeah, no, it wasn't intentional, and it wasn't an oversight. It was, I mean, when I came in to the Metropolis, I came in from New York. I wasn't the son of Chicago. I never stepped foot in Chicago prior to my election, except for two events. And so I didn't know many people in Chicago, in the metropolis of Chicago, let alone Chicagoland. I had a transition team that was helping me identify individuals around the metropolis. We had about 40 or so people that were introduced to me. I asked a number of people to think outside the box, to think of people who might not have been involved in the life of the metropolis, to get creative in terms of the mixture of the members that would make up this interim Metropolis Council. And it happened that we didn't have that many from this part of the metropolis, and I don't recall off the top of my head, but it was not an oversight and it wasn't intentional. It's just the mixture of who was there and kind of the skills and experiences that people brought to the table. So at the next Clergy Lady Assembly, of course, we will have a normal election process. There will be nominations from the floor, and of course, I look forward to working with the Northwestern Indianians. Hoosiers.
Or Boilermakers, like I like this. Okay, is there a question from the crowd? Because I don't want to ask all the questions. Anyone? There we go.
So if you can, please use the microphone when reading your question or asking your question, and state your name and where you're from, if you mind.
My name is Eleni Papadaki. I am from St. Constantine and Helen Cathedral. Don't count this as my question. I just want to make a statement. Start out that I want to congratulate you. I want to thank you. You've shown a good beginning, sending out the surveys and being concerned, our leader from the metropolis, being concerned about our needs and our opinions as far as how we can correct. It was a great beginning, and I congratulate you. At this point, I'd like, and that might be on your agenda. In your survey, you mentioned about strength. I feel we have all the strength that we need. We have the original religion, we have a language, and we have the culture. Our ancestors started this dream when they came to this country, and it was successful. Through time, though, it's fading away. I feel that it's important that the leaders keep this in consideration, because here in the United States, not like Greece, where religion is supported by the government. It's supported by all of us. And we need to, we're blessed, we need to embrace our three: religion, culture, and language. And I feel that our welcome non-Greeks that come in our families, if we are proud and we support it, I feel they will too. And I'd like to see your opinion and how you feel about this.
So thank you for your question or comment rather, and thank you for feeling strongly about something. It's important that people feel strongly about something. Otherwise, we just go through the motions of life. One of the things that I've learned during my listening tour, this is the last one. I've been to various parts of our metropolis, parts that many of you probably haven't visited. I visited churches and parishes, 7-8 hours away from here by car. And each parish is very different. And each parish has their own needs, and it's made up of a diverse group of people. You have some parishes where you have a real homogenous group, mostly Greeks, or first, second, third generation Greeks, or mixed marriages where you have at least one person in the marriage where they're Greek. You have other parishes where it's multicultural, and you have no Greeks. You have people, you talk about language. Which language in that parish? Which language, which culture in that parish? I think the thing that runs consistent throughout the metropolis in every single parish is our faith. Okay, and I think that needs to be the foundation upon which we build our parishes. Our ancestors who came to America, my parents were immigrants. When they came here, they brought something with them. But I know that they wanted to bring this here, not just to keep it a secret or keep it for themselves, or keep it something that is unattainable or distant from others who don't have the same experiences as them. I know they wanted to share that. I think our parishes and the future of our parishes depend on our ability to share, our ability to be open source, to speak, some technology. Are we going to keep this inheritance that we've been blessed to receive, many of us from infancy? Are we going to keep it exclusive to a specific ethnic group, a specific, small portion of, Chicagoland, or are we going to share it with all of Chicagoland? And if we want to share it with all of Chicagoland, we have to do it fully. We can't say, I want to share my Orthodox faith with you and my heritage with you, but on my terms. Okay? Otherwise, we're not sharing. Okay, so that's my opinion, and I think I really do think when we measure where we are, each parish, I have a feeling that we'll see that we're not doing a good job as much as we can in evangelizing and sharing and giving people hope, giving and sharing what we have received.
Okay, is there another question from the crowd, or I'll read one? Okay, gentleman right there.
I'm Keith Heilig. I'm from St. Iakovos in Valparaiso. Some of the priests require their new converts to go to the monastery to get baptized instead of having the sacrament performed in their own church. I want to know what your opinion was.
Thank you for the question. I'd like to know who that is, and so afterwards we can talk. Because that's not something that the priests are allowed to do. Okay? And I've been very clear with my clergy that in the instance when a person who comes to the faith has already been baptized, a Christian, and we accept their baptism, they are to be received after appropriate catechism. Okay? You have to go through catechism and you need to be taught the Orthodox faith. You need to be shaped into an Orthodox Christian before you're received into the church fully. But once they go through that, they are to be chrismated. Okay? We do not rebaptize Christians. And that's not my opinion. That's the decision of the church. And I've said to the clergy, anyone who violates that is violating decisions of the church, of a synod. So we do not make people get rebaptized. And if we do that, I don't know why they would send them off to a monastery to do that. It means that they're hiding it. And so after this is over, please come and speak to me. Thank you.
Okay, I have one question that was submitted online as part of registration, and this goes, Your Eminence, this is about the Lord's Prayer. The ending differs from church to church. Please let us know, is it deliver us from evil or deliver us from the evil one?
I'm not a theologian. We have theologians in the crowd, they can tell us. So that's the beauty of the Greek language, right? Ektoponiru. I guess that can be toponiro, right? Evil as a generic thing, or oponiros, the evil one. I think from my seminary days, I remember this being very controversial. We would stay up all night in our seminary dorms arguing whether it needs to be a personalized evil or an impersonal concept of evil. At the end of the day, we're asking for the same thing, to deliver us from something that's evil or someone that's evil. And the point is that we're asking God for this. Some of the fathers, I think, speak about the devil more pronouncedly in their commentaries of the Lord's Prayer. Others don't. And I would say theologically both are correct. I mean, but it makes sense for us to, in each parish, whatever the tradition is, that people are saying it the same way. So you're not interrupting each other.
Okay, is there a question from the crowd?
Okay, Your Eminence, I have a question. My name is Ross Tanger. I'm a member of St. Jacobos in Valparaiso and St. Constantine in Helen here in Maryville. Here's my question. Recently, the past months or year, the Catholic Church priesthood has experienced some unconscionable behavior. Are you aware of any such behavior in our Orthodox faith? And if so, what and how will you handle that?
Thanks for your question. So I think you're referring to the sexual misconduct and specifically pedophilia. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that's been in the news more and more. It comes in waves at times. I think when it happens, when it comes out, the media kind of goes out and searches for as much information to share with people so that people are aware of what's going on. And I think that's a good thing for people to know who's a predator, who's hiding things, and we want to make sure that our children are kept safe. Personally, I don't know of any ongoing or active cases of where this is occurring in the Orthodox Church. It has occurred in our church. We're not immune to it. This is not a disease and a problem that is only affecting the Roman Catholic Church. It affects all churches. It affects even non-churches. It affects families. There are pedophiles in people's homes. Okay, so we know that. If something like this were to happen in our metropolis, or if I hear of something, I will take the appropriate measures that we have in place for such misconduct. At the very least, removing the priest from having access to our parishes and our people. But I don't like those types of things. I don't think it's right for us to hide those types of things. When they occur, we have to be serious about correcting them. And we have to also make sure that we're preventing these types of things. If in the fall of 2019, the Archdiocese is going to be launching the Child Safety Policy. It's a policy and a procedure and protocol that will do its best to protect our children on the parish level and on a metropolis level. All people who have contact with children through ministries, youth ministries, will have to not only go through a background check, but also training to be able to spot signs of potential misconduct. So the more people we have a trained eye to spot this, the better off we're going to be, and the more likely we are to prevent something, or at least to catch it and stop it. Okay?
And we have a question from that side.
Ted Freehouse, St. Demetrius Greek Orthodox Church of Hammond. I have two questions. Number one, it's been since 2015 since we've had a Metropolis Clergy Lady Congress, unfortunately with the timely passing of Metropolitan Jacobos. So, number one, what is the plan to get the Metropolis together again next year? Are we going to wait till the fall, or is anything being planned sooner, and where that might be? So that's the one question. Number two, I want to understand your thoughts and opinion on the relationship between the monasteries and the Metropolis of Chicago. How do they interact? How do they relate? Do they not relate? And your opinion on where that stands in the life of our church.
Thank you. So I mentioned the Clergy Lady Assembly. I mentioned that we have an interim metropolis council, and the reason we have an interim metropolis council is because the Clergy Lady Assembly that was planned, there was one planned for the fall of 2018. So there was a regular Clergy Lady Assembly that was planned. By then, I think the hope was that there would have been a metropolitan in place. Because there wasn't a metropolitan in place, it was decided to cancel it. I mean, how could you have a metropolis-wide clergy lady assembly without a metropolitan in place? So a decision was made. We have already begun planning for 2019, the fall. It's going to be in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis. It's co-hosted by the two churches up there, St. Mary's and St. George. We will when we have the details ironed out with hotel and accommodations and the dates and everything, we will make that announcement. You'll be able to register. You'll have the clergy coming and the lay representation. So fall of 2019 is when we're having ours, okay? Hopefully by then, we'll go back into a normal cycle of every 2 years. Technically, we're supposed to have them every year, but they're very costly and very difficult to plan for every year. But we're going to think of ways to definitely bring the metropolis together at least once a year, if it's not for a formal clergy lady conference. In terms of the relationship between the monasteries, we have 2 monasteries in our metropolis, and the metropolis itself, the monasteries are monastic communities of the metropolis. They are my monasteries. They have, like every single monastery, they have their own internal life and cycle. And as a metropolitan, I respect that, and I have to respect that. They have their own daily worship cycle, they have their own needs, and so they have a community that is focusing on that, on those needs. Monasteries are not parishes. Monasteries are not supposed to be a substitute for a parish. We should not consider them our parishes. They are a community of monastics. Okay? The abbot and the abbess are responsible for their nuns and monks, not for you. Okay? It's nice to go and visit. It's nice to go on a retreat, to go venerate many of the relics that they have there when they have major feast days. It's nice. But they are not supposed to be your primary place to worship. That is not your community. Actually, it doesn't make sense to think that that is my community when you are all in the world. You're not monastics. If you wanted to be monastics, let's talk. I'll find you a monastery. You can go become a nun or a monk, and it's a beautiful thing. I'm a monk. But they are obedient to me. I am the shepherd of the metropolis, and we have a good working relationship. It's still a new working relationship, just like it's very new between myself and the parishes. So that's the relationship between the metropolis and the monasteries.
Another question from the crowd? Well, we want to try to get through everybody at least once.
Hello, Your Eminence. I'm Christine Calamani, and I'm a member of St. Constantine in Helen. I also participate in the Orthodox Christian Counseling Institute. I appreciated the question about keeping children safe in church and everywhere, but I'm also concerned about women who may have experienced clergy abuse or clergy inappropriate behavior. And I'm just wondering what measures are in place in those situations where it might be difficult or impossible for a woman to let even the holiest of priests know that.
Yeah, thank you for the courage to ask that question, first of all. Again, we have a policy in place that is a sexual misconduct policy for clergy. But that policy is only as good as our ability to enforce it, or our willingness to enforce it, right? And to see it through. I would say it's better not to have a policy if we're not going to be serious about enforcing a policy. I think this isn't the first time someone has asked a similar question about misconduct in general, not sexual misconduct, but misconduct of the clergy. And one of the common themes is, how can I report it? How can I come forward? How can I stop being a victim of some bad behavior? And I think as a metropolis, we need to find a way to implement something like that, where people aren't going to be afraid to be blacklisted or branded or ostracized or, whatever, because they're coming forward. Because one person coming forward and speaking to us about a person who's misbehaving, it could be a lay person who is misbehaving, by the way. Misconduct isn't only clergy misconduct, right? Let's just be fair and say that. There should be a mechanism in place where people can report and not be attacked. An investigation could be launched, and we can look into what the findings are and take necessary steps from there. So I don't believe we have that in place, at least a clear process of reporting, confidential process, right? I will work with some of my Metropolis Council members and find other consultants who can advise us for how to do this best.
Okay, thanks. Another question from the crowd?
Is someone taking notes, by the way? Okay, so please make sure we take that as a note, the issue, the need to kind of look into that. Okay, thanks.
Hello, and welcome. My name is Sophia Damianos, and I'm from the St. George Greek Orthodox Church in Cherville. My question to you was about the youth. How do you foresee working with our youth? And I'm talking through Sunday School in Goya on uniting us, number one, as a diocese, as opposed to 2 or 3 churches getting together, as more of a diocese with our youth and beyond, including our youth, for example, as junior parish council members or junior Philoptochos members. Do you have anything that you're planning on looking at that aspect of for our youth and keeping them within our church? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to repeat the questions only because I want the Facebook people to hear it in case that was something that people are complaining to me about. Repeat the question. So the question is, what's my plan for uniting the youth more as youth of the metropolis, right? And how do we keep them engaged by giving them opportunities to be members of organizations within the church? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, in summary. So I've said this before, and I'll say it again. My vision for the youth, I think, will begin by asking the youth questions, by actually sitting with the youth and not their parents, because their parents will often tell them what they need and what they should be doing, right, and how they should be doing it, and at some point they stop listening. Especially when they have the ability to drive. They don't. They can do their own thing. So we have a very similar to the listening tour. We're going to begin kind of roundtable discussions with our youth around the metropolis. So the first one is being planned, I think, for mid-October or mid to late October. I'm not sure of the scheduling specifically. In terms of broader inclusion and stuff, I need your help. Okay, I think for everyone to expect the Metropolitan to have the vision and the answer, or even the ability to execute a vision alone, is not reality. It's not going to work. So I need you all to be involved when we ask for your help. So don't expect my own vision to be the perfect vision right now. It's very limited, right? I'm here 6 months. It's getting broader and broader, and it's focusing more, but it'll get even better with your input and feedback and participation. Now, I will mention 2 statistics, though, so that you can all know how much I need your help. And this is the only time I'm going to do it tonight, I promise. I'm going to talk to you about money. And I know you say, oh, Papa, there's always talk about money. But I'm going to, everyone here tonight wants us to get better at something, right? We all want to grow. We want to get better as a metropolis. We want to do better work for our youth. But how much do you think do we have in our metropolis budget, which is going to be released very soon, for youth ministry? So we have 400,000 approximately Orthodox Christians in our metropolis, 6 states. How much is allocated in our budget? that's coming from stewardship money? How much? The budget is about 1.4 million, more or less. How much? How much do you think we should allocate? Raise your hand. Anyone? For youth ministry?
For the youth ministry for the whole diocese, a minimum of 150,000, a minimum.
Okay. $150,000 doesn't get us much, by the way. So our budget includes a line item that has a number on it, but we allocate $0. Okay, the money that we use for youth ministry is raised by special programs or sponsorships. It's not coming from donations specifically for the continuation of our youth ministry. If we don't get those sponsorships, and if we don't get, if we don't have that lunch, a successful lunch, well, that means that we don't have the money to invest in Funari Camp, in Junior Olympics, and then anything else that you appreciate. How much money do you think we put toward religious education? We all want to be super Orthodox. How much? Zero. And actually, the Presbytera Alicacos does a special fundraiser, a lunch, and she raises $10,000, poor thing by herself, to produce whatever material she can for religious education for our youth. $10,000. What are we getting for $10,000 nowadays? You can't buy a car for $10,000. So again, when we talk about vision and the execution of vision, I need your help. I need you to give input, feedback, ideas, and then when we come together and say, yes, these are the best of these ideas, I need your help to fund them. Okay, and I'm specifically talking about money, treasure, not just time and talent, but treasure as well. I promise I won't talk to you about money again.
To follow up on the youth question, I promised the young man I would ask this question for him. He had to leave. And it's, could we possibly get basketball back into the Junior Olympics and be until the age of 18?
Did he leave?
Yes,
Is he
unfortunately.
the tall guy that was
He
here?
was a tall
He was
man.
the tall guy. I figured it was the tall guy. Well, where's Deacon Chris? Will Deacon Chris take note that we need to do something about that? I don't know. I don't even know the age limit. So we'll take a note and see what we can do. There was somebody actually who emailed me and asked, well, I think it might have been the same person. It was the same person. I read his email. He asked me the same thing, asking about wanting basketball for a little older because his friends and he can't play anymore, and they're kind of like stuck not being able to do what they love to do. So we got to figure out what we can do for the older kids and sports. Take a note. We'll take a note of that.
Any questions from the crowd?
Hello, Your Eminence. Thank you for allowing us to be here with you and you taking time to get to know us a little bit. My name is Patricia Christos Rogers, and I'm from the St. Andrews Greek Orthodox Church in South Bend, Indiana. And I have a long thing written up, but I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to say.
Just use your mic. Use the
Okay,
mic.
thank you. I just have some concerns and doubts. Apparently there's something called the Ephraimite movement in the Greek Orthodox Church, and with utmost respect, I just pose this thought as I'm challenged to understand why in the 21st century we lay parishioners should adopt the Ephraimite movement, or how is that being handled? I mean, it confuses me because it's not something I'm real comfortable with, and I didn't grow up that way, and so I have a lot of questions about that and concerns. Sorry, I rambled.
No, that's fine. Thank you for your question. So I don't know what each person understands by Ephraimite movement. I mean, everyone that has been thrown around and used. I've heard it used many times in the last 6 months, and so I have a feeling, for each person it might be expressed, or they might have experienced something, and they categorize it under the Ephraimite movement. Okay. I will say this, movements in the church, whatever they may be called, are usually bad. The church doesn't have movements. The church doesn't have cult leaders. The church has religious leaders that shouldn't become cultish. And they shouldn't ask for people to follow them blindly. I mean, one of the most beautiful treasures in the world, not just in the church, in the world, is freedom. And the ability to discern, to ask questions, to disagree even, to turn our back on God. That's a gift. Right? From the very beginning, God gave us that freedom. And what we do with it is important. How we respond to God's calling is important. In our church, we don't believe that a person should ever walk alone. We have people around us, family members, clergy that are there to help us in our journey that's communal, in our journey to Christ. You know, unfortunately, I think it becomes very easy for a man who stands up and has some sort of authority in the church to see himself bigger than Christ and more important than Christ, and insist that people can only get to Christ through that person. Okay, and I'm glad I have Coca-Cola here, and I have water here. Okay, and I like to use this when I try to teach people about what a priest ought to be in the church for his community. A priest can be like Coca-Cola or water. Okay? When you look at this Coca-Cola from there, you can't see what's on the other side, can you? Because it's opaque. And when a priest insists that we only look at him and not look through him and beyond him to find Christ, that's bad. Then that person becomes Christ. When the priest is translucent, he's just there to hold water that's clear. You can see on the other side. You can see Christ. So, whatever the movement is called, it can be the Nathanielite movement, right? It can be the Ephraimite movement. It's wrong. And people should not be forced to follow a specific set of traditions or rules that suffocate you. Okay? The church is a hospital. It is not a place where we become robots or we become cookie-cutter human beings that all match each other or walk in the same way. That's not the church. The church should become when we're sick, we're tired, we're hurting, and there's a doctor there, and that doctor is Christ. Okay? So I don't know if I've answered your question. Okay? But I ask my priests to be like this. When they get like this, we have to empty it out and put some water back in. Okay? That's bad.
I have one more question. It's getting very expensive to have a funeral and get buried in this country. So my question is, what is the actual stance on cremation in the Orthodox Church? Does it exist? Or, I know it doesn't exist, but will it ever?
Well, cremation doesn't happen when you get married. Did you say when you get married and buried? Buried. Oh, buried. I'm sorry, I thought you said married. I'm trying to think, the person wants to be cremated before he got married. That's a good thing. Maybe that's the, I don't know, solution to a problem. I apologize. Yeah, I mean, I know to bury a loved one is expensive. It's a cost, but as Orthodox Christians, we believe in the burial of the dead. We follow the example of Christ. We believe in the sanctity of the body, but we don't just destroy it, and we don't burn it. It doesn't turn into ash and then scatter it or keep it on a mantle. You know, there are people who wish to be cremated, and we don't force them to be buried. I mean, we try to, before they pass away, if they have a question, the priest ought to teach them and talk to them. Maybe they haven't considered something. Whenever there is an issue of finances, it should, a person shouldn't be forced to be cremated because of the finances. The church and the parish should help them. If they want to be buried, we should help them be buried. In the instance, however, when someone has been cremated, the church has a decision. The Synod of our Ecumenical Patriarchate has decided many years ago, and I will share that with the fathers so that they have the actual decision, that a person who has been cremated, we can do a trisagion service. No koliva can be used, but we can perform a trisagion service at the tomb, or if the ashes are buried, or in the church, but with the petrachilion. So we don't do a funeral service, but we could pray for their soul. We can have a trisagion service for them.
Okay, next question. Paul?
You have my question. You have my questions written. I sent those in already.
I haven't, Paul, I haven't.
Yeah, pick any one.
Why don't you ask her?
I wrote them down. It's been a few weeks. That's why. Because I had several questions.
Okay, well, I'll do a follow-up one on this whole cremation thing. This is one of your questions. And I'm going to pronounce this one wrong, but so help me with this. What is the difference between the Trisagion prayers and the Mnemosynon prayers? Certain parishes cut out the Evlogratia part when it comes to memorial service. I was informed that there is no need for the Evlogratia because they are done. Okay, sorry. Because they are done during the Orthos and it is a repeat. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the memorial service, Mnemosynon, usually has a kolivo. Okay, so that's the major difference. The prayer is the same at the end that we read at the end of the service for the soul of the departed. And I actually learned something this summer, and I'm going to talk to the priests about it when we meet October 2nd in terms of liturgical formulas. But it's correct, the Eulogitaria in our Ecumenical Patriarchate, whenever a memorial is chanted on a Sunday, okay, the memorial service does not include the Eulogitaria because they have been chanted. And it's a different, those Eulogitaria are not resurrectional in the memorial service. So because we're doing a memorial service on a Sunday, which is the day of the resurrection, we only chant the Eulogitaria hymns that were chanted in Orthros, because those are specific to the resurrection, not to the burial. Okay? So it's correct not to chant them. That's the more accurate way of doing it in our Ecumenical Patriarchate's Typikon. It's not wrong to chant them either, but the more correct way is not to chant them because of the theological meaning.
Good evening, Your Evidence and Eminence.
Eminem.
And thank you so much for your leadership. My name is Paula Dranger, and I'm also part of the Orthodox Christian Counseling Ministries. But my question for you tonight is, what are your thoughts regarding spiritual teaching and outreach through social media, podcasts, interactive platforms, newsletters, etc., and who might you be including in your audiences?
So what do I think about having those myself or in general? Oh, in general, yeah, because I have no time for a podcast. For my own podcast, at least. I think all of the things that you mentioned, the different mediums, they're good. They're not, social media platforms are good. It's the way we communicate nowadays. I think most of our kids and adults are used to digesting small bits of information. I mean, even movie trailers are like a specific length. You can't give a 10-minute movie trailer no matter how important the movie is, right? So we should use these tools. We should definitely find ways to use them more effectively, because I think just posting a picture doesn't do it, right? You have to have a message with the picture. But it shouldn't end there. And it shouldn't be the main focus of what we do either. I mean, it shouldn't, what we do shouldn't just, we shouldn't put all of our eggs in social media, right? As Orthodox Christians, I mentioned before, we're not supposed to learn about the faith alone. It shouldn't be something that I learn by listening to the best podcasts out there, right? I need to have someone explain it to me. Like, was it the Ethiopian who was looking for somebody to explain a chapter from the scriptures? They needed someone. They had the scriptures, but they needed someone to explain to them. The same thing with social media. What's the point of having 20,000 followers if that's all we're giving them? We have to then connect them. We have to find them. We have to connect them with other priests or other Orthodox Christians.
Okay, I have a question that was submitted. How are you going to ensure that our clergy are being adequately financially compensated for when parish councils vote against cost of living raises year after year, but living costs continue to rise?
Was that from one of my priests?
No comment.
That must have been from one of my priests. I don't know. I mean, maybe not. But I think I've spoken to the priests about making sure that they stay well. I'm concerned about their wellness, their physical, mental, spiritual wellness. And that's something that I think I need help with achieving. It's, you know, it needs to be the whole parish that helps the priest stay on track. To be able to go on a vacation, to rest, to be able to afford to pay for the education of his children. These are just standard things that we wouldn't want anyone to have to worry about. When I was a seminarian, a fellow who I consider my grandfather gave me some advice. And I will give this advice to all of the members of parish councils here tonight and who are watching. He said to me, make sure you don't acquire a lot of debt, unsustainable debt. Okay, I didn't listen to him, but that's besides the point. Make sure you don't have a lot of debt as a priest. Because if you have a lot of debt, your mind will constantly be on money. How you will constantly think about, how can I make more money to pay off my debt? Not to become rich. It's to pay off this pressure. How do I get rid of the pressure, the financial pressure? And if he said, this is a layman, he said, if your mind is on money, you're not going to be praying and thinking about your people. You're not going to be a good priest. And potentially, he said, you're going to compromise your principles to acquire money. So think about that. When you go into your parish council meetings and you talk about the scale where a priest needs to be on, make sure they're on scale. I don't think the scale that we have, the salary scale, is asking for too much. And I don't think that a regular cost of living increase is asking for too much. Now, I know it's hard raising the money for all of this. So we have to find a better way of making our parishes more sustainable, help them grow, help inspire people so that they're giving more of their money, and inviting more people in so that we're sharing the burden with others. Unless you win the lottery, your parish needs to find ways to raise the money, right? To pay for the priest. So there's tension, there's pressure. So we have to do a better job of making our parishes flourish so that then it could be a much easier decision to make to give a priest a normal salary, the benefits that we would want to have ourselves, and a regular pay increase. And, you know, it's tough when you're looking at a budget and you have to make cuts. It's the worst thing to have to figure out what you're going to cut. But again, think about what a priest will go through if he feels that financial pressure and has debt. He's not putting his whole heart and effort into the parish if he's thinking about his debt. I can guarantee you that.
Welcome, Your Eminence. My name is Pete Zervis from St. Constantine and Helen in Maribel. I was kind of curious what your inspection going around doing the listening and everything, and you've seen the different parishes that exist. What's your thought is on their, have you guys looked at all at their financial feasibility is there a problem developing in where we don't have enough financial strength spread out over the different parishes? And how is that contributing to the funding going back to the Archdiocese?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we're all connected, right? Bottom up, top down. If our parishes aren't doing well, it's going to impact the bottom line of the Archdiocese, which will impact the metropolis, which will impact the ministries we offer to your parishes. So it's a vicious cycle. But it could be actually a beautiful circle also, if we have strong parishes. The more parishes will thrive, the stronger the metropolis and Archdiocese will be. I mentioned the baselining committee that is collecting data. It will collect the financial data. We've asked for, I believe the committee's asked for the past 10 years of financials from parishes, or that's what they're going to ask for, to be able to review what the trend looks like, what the stewardship numbers, how they kind of fall on that same chart, and to see what we're doing wrong. I mean, where we're failing, why we can't raise money, why we can't grow our communities. During the listening tours, there have been some parishes that have expressed grave concern that it's not going to be sustainable for them much longer. In meeting with some parishes and representatives from parishes, and we're talking about parishes that have about 50 communities, 50 families that are trying to figure out how to do things. I've also visited a parish that has, I think, 60 or 65 families, and surprisingly, they have a budget that's around $400,000. Yeah, I'll tell you how they do it. And I asked the priest, how many festivals do you have? And he said, we don't have festivals. Our people tithe. All right, you know what that is? Who knows what tithing is? It's the Old Testament, the rule of giving to God 10% of what you have received. So they take seriously their commitment to God, not to their parish. It's an offering to God, and that's how they see it. It's a spiritual exercise for them. And one person has said, he says, I tithe because that's the way I serve God and not mammon. It's the way for me to serve God and not mammon. He gives his money away so that he doesn't worship money. So he gives 10%. All right, think about it. This is the mentality of that parish, 65 families that have $400,000. Now, if all of our parishes did that, I bet your budget would be more than $2 million, $2-3 million if people tithed. If not tithing, give something. Our average giving for Orthodox Christians is about $185 to $200 something per person. That's not nearly enough for us to have a thriving community. Okay, so I said I wasn't going to talk about money, but you brought it up.
Another question in the crowd back there.
Hi, my name is Tula Wondolowski. I'm from St. George in Cherville. I have a question about what happens in a parish that's in arrears of their archdiocesan dues, which puts them in a situation where their elections cannot be ratified, which means we are not able then to move our leadership around and bring new people on board. How does the parish or how does the metropolis assist a parish like that?
That's a great question. I haven't experienced that just yet, but I'm sure that will come up. I mean, I have a list of our parishes and where they are in terms of their monthly giving to the Archdiocese. Some of them are in arrears, some of them I have paid it off in full. I've said that I like to have a metropolis of mercy. Okay, that's what I'd like to base our metropolis on, and have our metropolis be known as the metropolis of mercy. When I come up and meet with parishioners or representatives of the parish, when they haven't been able to pay their assessment, their annual contribution, they'll have to explain to me why. I mean, we'll sit down and have a serious, open conversation. I mean, there's probably a reason for it. It's not they don't want to. I mean, I don't know any parish that doesn't want to. If they're hiding money, that's bad, right? If they have double sets of books, that's bad, right? And that used to happen a lot in the past when it was a different system. But you know, if a parish has gone through a major crisis in the past year, or its stewardship members have fallen, I want to know why they're falling, right? What happened in the parish that has kept parishioners from giving what they normally give, and we have to correct it if it's correctable. If it's something that we can't correct and there just isn't enough money, we'll have to work around that and figure out how we can keep the parish going and not punish the people who are working hard for the parish, to figure out how we can squeeze more money out of them. I mean, I don't want to come in with a sledgehammer, you know, and have people afraid I'm going to break their knees. I'm not the mafia. I'm the metropolitan. Okay, and so the people on our finance committee, on the parish life committee, they're not tasked to come in and beat you up for money, or bully you until you pay up, or threaten you until you pay up, or punish you until you pay up. But if parishes are hiding and not paying and trying to, you know, overburden other parishes by not paying, then there will be consequences like not ratifying elections. But if everything is normal and it's just that we've fallen short of our goal, we'll find a way to either help you boost your income, or we'll have to, you know, just deal with it for the year that we don't have that money.
But that puts the parish in a difficult situation, because you can't move leadership out that perhaps are making bad decisions, financial decisions. So by not ratifying an election, you remain with a group of people that perhaps have made some bad decisions.
Yeah, that's why I said I'm not going to punish them by not ratifying them. We have to see the reason for why they couldn't pay. If it's a legitimate reason, I can't punish that parish by not ratifying their elections. It doesn't make sense, right? What is it, cutting your nose to spite your face? Is that, it doesn't make sense. The people who are volunteering and sweating and rolling up their sleeves are not the ones that we should punish. We should find a way, though, to help them correct what went wrong, right? So that's what my goal is going to be. When I come up and face a parish like that, I want them to be truthful. I want them to reveal what went on in the parish that caused them to fall short of their goal. If it's fixable, we'll fix it. If it's not, we continue. We work harder the next year. Okay?
On that same note, there's a
Always talking about money.
this one. There's a question submitted to me that kind of follows up with that one, is when will the metropolis consider closing the smaller churches? This would make the remaining parishes stronger.
You know what that's called? I've coined something. I've coined the phrase and I published it, so I know it's mine. It's called ecclesial Darwinism. Okay? Ecclesial Darwinism. Survival of the fittest. Okay? We have to close, we have to make sure we just euthanize the small, weak parishes so that the so-called big parishes remain strong. And I don't buy that. I think, you know, even the big parishes aren't strong, number one. Okay? It's just that they have a lot more room for error. Okay? But a lot of these parishes that have 500, 600, 700 families are also making mistakes, and they're not as strong as they could. There are parishes at some point that might have to think about that, but that's not going to be a decision we reach together in terms of merging a parish to help other parishes stay strong. And that's the wrong reason to ever make these types of decisions. My focus will be, how do we make all of our parishes stronger? Okay? How do we make the weaker ones, the smaller ones stronger? Maybe we adopt a system of a brother or sister parish, where stronger parishes are assisting the smaller parishes. Maybe we find a way to share expenses. Maybe we buy our products together as a metropolis, so we can get a better rate on candles, or a better rate on olive oil, or whatever it is that we're buying, thimiama, right? I mean, we should incorporate best practices. Businesses do this all the time. We have 58 parishes, we have a lot of buying power, we have a lot of great minds, we have a lot of, business savvy people. So anything that can help strengthen our parishes, I'm for. Closing a parish to help our parish get stronger is the wrong reason to close a parish. So, yeah, let's buy thimiama together. We could buy 10,000 pounds of thimiama, for a couple of years it'll last.
Is there a question from the crowd? I've got a couple other questions here. Here's a
We can even think about creating our own business. That's it, isn't it? I mean, it's not bad. Why can't we produce, why can't we have a revenue generating, not metropolis, but an entity?
Orthodox Amazon.
We are a jungle indeed, we are a jungle, Orthodox jungle, Zugla was
Okay, I have a question submitted online for, it's about St. Nicholas. The newest estimate by the Archdiocese to complete the St. Nicholas Shrine is about $80 million. This is twice the original estimate. What were the changes requested by the Archdiocese to double the cost of the project? You do know that the unit price is roughly $18,000 per square foot, which makes the shrine one of the costliest commercial buildings in the United States.
I don't know that it's a commercial building, but yeah, it's per square foot. If it's $18,000 per square foot, I mean, you can buy gold for less than that, right? I mean, I don't know. First of all, I don't even know if that's the right estimate, $80 million. I know that's a number that's been talked about and spread. I don't know if it's based on anything factual. I haven't seen it. I actually don't even know what the original estimate was and what that was based on. And I don't know why it's gone up so much. I mean, I know that we are dealing with one of the most expensive areas to build on, and we're building a church that is utilizing, expensive materials, and we have an expensive architect and all of that stuff. It's expensive, but I don't know why the cost has jumped. I think that the Archdiocese is conducting some sort of audit of the project to see where exactly those costs have gone up and why. Hopefully we'll have the results and have a better understanding of it, because it's a shame that the church has not been built yet. And I think it's a shame that people are saying, let's not build it, or let's forget about it. Because I'll tell you something. If you go down to, who's been down to the World Trade Center and has seen that building? Isn't it beautiful? I mean, the location, what we're looking at, I mean, a church at that spot. If we don't get our act together, that building, instead of having a crucifix on the top, could very easily have a crescent moon or a star. Okay? And I don't want us to lose that building. I don't care what it costs. We have to get our act together. We have to make sure we do things right from now on and build our church. Because if we lose that building, which we could, if we lose that building, I tell you that there will be another religious group that comes in to snatch it up in a heartbeat. And they will not hesitate to build it for $200 million. Okay?
Okay, is there a question from the crowd? Okay, well, I got a whole bunch of sent to me, so.
Again, we talked about money too much tonight. I come to Maryville and I talk about money. Cordini.
Okay, here's one that's
You're not allowed. It's last.
Here's one that's not about money. Is it a sin not to kiss the priest, the bishop's hand?
Now when he has pneumonia. It's actually recommended by your doctor not to kiss the hand. No, it's not a sin not to kiss the hand of the bishop or the priest. I mean, we have to understand why we kiss the hand anyway. It's not a sign of respect. That's not why we kiss the bishop's hand or the priest's hand. We kiss the hand because we believe that those hands have touched something holy. They've touched the body and blood of Christ. And so why do we venerate relics? It's the same thing. The saint is around holiness. He's around God. When the priest's hands touch the body and blood of Christ, no matter how sinful the priest or bishop is, that's why we do it. That his hands have touched something holy and we receive that blessing from his hand. It's not a sign of respect. It's not something we do to... if somebody doesn't want to do it, it's okay. We don't force our hand in the face of somebody. No. But it's important if they do it to know why they're doing it. That's all.
Any questions? Okay, Father Ted?
I invoke the right not to answer.
Once again, welcome to Maryville.
Look at the camera. I want people to see who can see.
They can see from the back too. You've made it very obvious that you're from New York, specifically the Bronx. And I'd just like to ask a question of you specifically dealing with the Bronx. Is the Bronx Zoo as cool and interesting as they make it out to be on Animal Planet?
The Bronx is a zoo. So it's not just the Bronx Zoo. The Bronx is a zoo. If you come to the Bronx, you don't have to go to the Fordham Road and see the animals behind cages. We're all animals over there.
Are they Orthodox?
We're not taking questions about the Yankees tonight. They're going to win the championship, so you know. The Cubs aren't going to be in it, so the Yankees will win. I just said because the Cubs aren't going to be in it, the Yankees will win. Did you understand what I said, Father? Did you understand what I said? I said if the Cubs were in, the Yankees wouldn't win. But since they're not going to be in, we're going to win.
Look to your right.
That's the White Sox.
Okay, here's another question that was submitted. What is being done to get the 20 and 30-year-olds to be part of the church?
Money.
I don't know. I mean, I say that not laughing. I mean, I don't know. I think we worry so much that the 20 and 30-year-olds aren't in church. And sometimes I wonder if we worry for them or we worry for ourselves. Are we worried that we have failed? Or are we worried that they're lost? Because I think, if we really believe, if we have faith, if we're really praying that the Holy Spirit is guiding our kids, they're never lost. They're never away from God. I really do believe that our kids, even when they're not in church, I would love for them to be in church. I would love for them to be engaged and active and understand and be present and their hearts on fire. Don't misunderstand what I'm about to say. But our kids, I think, are touched by God. Our kids are inspired. I think our kids are faithful. Our kids are doing the work of the church, even if they're not in the church right now. Okay? I think it's important for the parents to pray for their kids. It's important not to, overwhelm them, not to suffocate them. The father of the prodigal son let his son go. And he was gone for a while. The father didn't go after him, didn't go find him, didn't send people to look for him, to spy on him, to make sure he was okay, like most parents would do today. He let his son go. And he had enough faith that what he taught him, that what he learned from being in the house, by being close to the house, by knowing that the Father loved him, would eventually bring him back. And so that's why I said, are we worried that we have failed the kids? Are we worried that we haven't instilled in them that spark that will ignite again for them to come back? Because I think you have. I think parents are doing a good of a job as they can. I think if you're teaching your children the basic, how to be basic good human beings, how to ask for forgiveness, how to love, how to show humility, that will come back to them at some point. And they'll snap out of it and they'll come back. Now, it's important for the priests to be engaged, for the community to be out there, offering them opportunities to snack back onto the church and, offer them the ladder and the life vest when they need it, to walk along the river that they're flowing in, to help them when they need help. But when they come back, what are they going to find? What kind of a church will they find? So they've left because something hasn't inspired them, or something else has gotten their attention, right, in college, after college. When they come back, will they come back to a church that is inspiring, that is really a Christian community? Or will they come back and find a bunch of people bickering and being angry at each other and arguing over Subratya cost, or arguing over, whether we should pay this or that? Because I think our young people are probably calling us out on our hypocrisy many times. And that's why they've decided to stay away for now. So, if we really want to do something for these kids to bring them back, let's work on ourselves a little bit as the adults. Make sure we are building communities that are communities of love, Christian communities. So when they come back, they want to stay. And maybe not want to leave.
Question in the crowd back.
My name's Trent Rofanos, and I'm here from Saints Constantine and Helen. One of the things that I've done with my own children is we would tell saint stories at night. And we would share these miraculous stories, and not always just stories about the ancient saints, but about occurrences that happened every day, or in our metropolis, or friends that had stories that showed what it meant to be a Christian, or living a Christ-like life, and how it transformed certain people and brought them closer to Christ. And one of the most powerful ways we have to communicate through our whole history, from before we had language, was through storytelling. So I was thinking, why don't we collect? We must have millions of beautiful stories of examples of Orthodox faith that we all could share, and put them together in some media presentation that we could have a weekly saint story, or a story about something inspiring that can bring us closer into the faith, capitalizing the storytelling.
I think that's a really nice idea, and I think it could be included at some point in our religious education program, kind of stories of everyday Orthodox Christians, right? That would inspire young people or children, from little kids growing up. But again, I will come back and say, there's nothing more impactful than the story of a child's parents. A parent has the ability to impact their child more than any story. And hopefully the kids are seeing the Orthodox Christian examples of faith at home, right? Because think about this. Imagine what would happen if we read stories to our children and they never saw this one ever in their lives. Simple stories like you mentioned, of Orthodox faith, of transformative moments in life, and they don't see it in their parents. They don't see it in their relationship with their siblings. They don't see it in the immediate church, their home. Growing up, it would be the church is a fantasy. It doesn't exist in my reality. It's only someone else's reality. So, then we lose them. Because they'll say, okay, I've never seen what dad or mom has read to me. So I emphasize the important role that parents play in raising kids. But not so much to pressure them, but to be the example for them. And when you fall short of the example, talk to them. Have them understand that the mistake you've made, what that means, and what the church means when you make a mistake, that you come back to Christ, you come back and He accepts you. Teach them that.
Is there a question from the crowd?
Go home early?
Wait.
Hi, I'm Chris Manantris. I'm from St. Diacolos, Valparaiso. And there's probably a bunch of women in the room that want to ask this question, and they all looked at me and said, Chris, you asked it. Is there a dress code in the church? Is it okay for women to wear slacks to church?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cough while you were asking the question. So the question, if people haven't heard, is there a dress code in the church? And specifically, can women wear pants? Is that the question that you're asking specifically? I mean, I would say there is a dress code in that there are things that we shouldn't wear to church. Okay, there are things that are indecent to wear to church. And as a priest, as a bishop, I've experienced that. I mean, at weddings and people think they're going to a cocktail party or something. I mean, it's wrong. And we have to understand the space we're going into. I don't prescribe to the notion of a dress code or what you must wear. Right? I know what we shouldn't be wearing and how we shouldn't be coming to church in terms of, like, if I have dress shoes, I'm going to wear my dress shoes to church. I won't wear my sneakers to church. It's different. If I have to go to a sporting event, if it's a little kid, I've seen them come to church. It's okay. I mean, but we have our Sunday best as I grew up. Right? My parents had, a few clothes for me that I only wore at church. Same thing with my sisters. I do think that women can wear pants in church, so long as it's appropriate. I mean, you're not going to wear, leather pants to church, okay? Or ripped jeans to church, okay? Same thing with men. I mean, we shouldn't go with, our golf attire because that's what we want to wear. You go to church. You want to be comfortable. No, you're going to church. You're going to present yourself to your Lord. So as long as we're going and we're not indecent and we're not just thinking we're going to any old space, we're going into the Holy of Holies. We're going into the holy place. We dress the best way we can with the best that we have for that. If it happens to be pants for women, it's okay. If that's the best that you have, come like that. If you have a dress, wear the dress. It's okay. It's okay to wear a dress too. Okay?
Can I ask a quick question, piggybacking on that one?
Oh,
Sorry.
man.
I lived in Greece. I know I done the pants thing there. I can't do that here. I'm not there yet. But is that a rule for women that's going to be dictated across the metropolis, or is it going to be left up to each parish priest to make the determination about pants for women in church?
I don't know. And maybe I have to ask my priests. I will ask them, who is dictating what people should wear in church? I'm not issuing a directive. That's not what I want to focus on, what people should wear in church. There are far more important things that I want to focus on. Okay? And I think the same thing applies to the priests in parishes. They also have way more important things to worry about than dress code. Obviously, if it's something that's a problem, if it's something that needs to be addressed in the parish, you can do it once and move on. Okay, but I will talk to the clergy, because if it is an issue, we ought to know. I mean, I don't want people to feel suffocated when they come to church. Okay? I want them to feel free when they come to church. When you go to church, you should feel like you're in your home. And when you're home, you're not hiding things. When you're home, you're open and honest, hopefully, with those around you. You don't feel uncomfortable when you're home. And that's the setting that I would like for our parishes to be. The home of God that He's inviting us to. And when I invite someone to my house, I make them, as best I can, feel comfortable. I don't make them abide by very strict rules. If I take off my shoes at home, and I have a guest that comes and wears their shoes, I'm going to let them wear their shoes. Okay? Because by asking them to take off their shoes, I may make them uncomfortable being in my house. They may have a hole in their sock, for all I know. Okay? But if wearing shoes makes them comfortable in my home, I will let them do that. I think God wants us to be in His home and feel at home.
Any other questions from the crowd? Okay. I got two questions here that are very similar, so I'll just paraphrase it, because taking a combination of both. Please discuss the church's posture on conducting services fully in the native language, whether it be English, Greek, Japanese, etc., etc.
Well, one of my deacons knows Korean, and so I had him do Korean in one of the services on purpose, actually, because I wanted those who are staunch supporters of any language, for that matter, to know what it feels like when you don't understand anything. And so he went up and he did the petitions in Korean, and no one even noticed that he did it in Korean. That was the best thing. It was great, because no one realized what he was saying, and it was probably because no one realized what he would have said if he said it in Greek or English. Because half the time our people are sleeping in church. Okay? All kidding aside, but he did do it in Korean. But the language is a tool. I've said it 1,000 times. Language is a tool. It is a tool for us to communicate a message. If I speak to you in a language right now tonight that you don't understand, it's not a listening tour. Well, it is a listening tour, because all you're doing is listening. But there's no conversation, there's no dialogue, there's no communion. And so, in our parishes that are, pluralistic, multicultural, sometimes we use both languages, Greek and English. There are parishes in our metropolis where English is only used, and I accept that, and it's okay, because that's the language of the people in the community. It doesn't make sense to me for us to insist on a specific liturgical language if we don't know what we're doing or saying. It doesn't mean, however, that the language can't open up tools. And so what I've said in the past is I really would like my priests to know Greek. I really would like for them to know. When they go to seminary from now on, I'm going to ask them to do their best to learn Greek. Because as a priest, that's a tool that is going to be very useful to them. Okay, as a theologian, as a person who reads the scriptures, as a person who has to reflect on words, on sermons. But it's wrong for us to expect people to just know the Greek language or even the English language. I mean, most people know English. My mom doesn't know English, but I don't worry about the language. I think most parishes use the language that's appropriate in their community based on the people in the pews. And I leave that to the discernment of our priests. They know best what to do in their parishes.
Question in the crowd?
Hello, Your Eminence. My name is Georgia Kerrigan, and I'm from St. George in Cherville.
And my question is, as a mother of young adult sons in their 20s, and this next new generation of Orthodox Christians that we're raising, and the challenges today of wanting tattoos, and discouraging them, and always raising them to believe they were against our religion, and then, you know, they become adults, and you really don't have control over that, and they may want to get a tattoo, even if it's small, in memory of a loved one that they've lost, to remember them and, you know, honor them in that way. So I guess what is our faith, our church's stance on tattoos in the Orthodox faith? That we can keep encouraging them, not that I really have anything against tattoos, but I guess
Why are you
encouraging them to-
afraid? Why are you afraid that your child will get a tattoo? What are you afraid of?
Well, I guess because I know there's a lot of things that we say are against our religion, and we still do them.
Yeah, but you want the religion to bail you out,
Yes, I guess so.
right? I mean,
But I don't have control, so-
you're asking me to do your job.
I'm just wondering, I always told them if they have Father Constantine's permission, they can get one.
You see, but I think by your question, you're really worried that by getting a tattoo, your child is going to kind of go down the wrong path, or be associated with something, or deviate from the norm, or whatever, right?
I don't really associate tattoos with being male.
Okay,
I really don't.
all right.
It's just this generation now, it's just so much about tattoos, and you get not only one, you get more.
Yeah.
More.
Well, I think having a conversation with your children about a tattoo is important to have. I mean, I almost got one when I was not as a priest. That was when I was a teenager. Our friends wanted to go get tattoos, so we walked into. We were thinking about what we were going to get, and we sketched some things out that we would give the artist, and we walked into one of the tattoo places. I think it was like 16, 15 years old. We were stupid. So we walked in the Bronx, and probably Dirty Beatles too over there, but it was right. So we walked in to the tattoo parlor, and as we were looking through the binders and ideas on the wall and whatever, and we were getting excited and figuring out what we were going to do. I'm going to get a dragon. I'm going to get my name in Asian script, whatever. Or I'm going to get a tribal pattern on my arm, for like years. Some guy walks in, this big guy walks in, and he had tattoos all over himself. And that's not what scared us. The guy had implanted horns, metal horns, in his head. So the piercings were that they're implanted under your head, and they screw in these horns. And we looked at the guy, and we looked at each other, and we ran out. So we didn't get a tattoo. But again, along the same lines as the respect for our bodies, I think that's where tattoos fall. I mean, there are certain traditions and cultures where tattoos, even Christian tattoos, like they'll put a little cross on their hand, or it's part of their culture, right? But that's very different than even tribal tattoos. I mean, you go to Africa, they're tribal tattoos. This is part of the people. So we don't frown upon that because that's what they consider to be normal. That's part of their life. That's part of growing up for centuries. What we're talking about is, a picture of something, a word of something, a name, a heart, a face, whatever. They're beautiful artwork. It's beautiful artwork. But, we have to teach our children that there are better ways to commemorate someone who has fallen asleep than a tattoo. That there are more important ways to express ourselves, right? More healthy ways to express our individuality and uniqueness than a tattoo. A tattoo doesn't go away. I mean, it's 20 years, you may not want that on your arm, But I think having that conversation of giving kids options, helping them open the horizon, because when they're with their peers, that's all they're focused on. My friends and I only were focused on tattoos. We wanted a tattoo that was cool. Thankfully that guy walked in and we got scared. But you know what? The truth is, my parents didn't talk to me about what else we can do as teenagers that's healthy. We were just doing what everyone else did. So I encourage you to do that. Not say, oh, the priest says it's bad or the church says it's bad. Tell them what's good. Show them what's good. And I think if you can show them the goodness in life and the ways to express themselves in a healthy way, they'll probably pick that. Okay? I'm glad I didn't get the tattoo now.
Question from the crowd? Okay, well, we have plenty here. In divine liturgy, are members allowed to raise hands in prayer? In some churches, some members have started this.
Hallelujah. Well, I said before that we're half asleep in church, in our services. I mean, quite literally sometimes. I don't know what people do I've never seen anyone raise their hands in prayer. I know some people, when they recite the Lord's Prayer, they may raise their hands up, or when they receive communion, they may cross themselves, cross their arms, and in my opinion, I mean, I don't think worship should be distracting. I don't think that somebody should necessarily do something that the entire community is not doing. You know, prostrations, for example. I mean, for somebody to go into the middle of the aisle and start doing mega, full prostrations in the middle of the service. I mean, my mother does it, my aunt does it, the old timers do it, that's how they grew up. But for somebody to do this now, it could distract. It distracts the other people. It sends a message like, I'm holier than you. Or maybe it puts that thought in that person. So my opinion is, and my advice is for people to do what's normal in that parish setting, not necessarily to go off and be the person that stands out. Okay? You can worship God with your hands to your side, and you can worship God with your hands in the air. But the point is, if you're doing something that someone's going to constantly look at you, you're not helping them pray. Okay?
Questions from the crowd? All right, here we go. Here's another one somewhat related to money. Word on the street is that there is a good possibility, and I assume these are the mean streets of Chicago, a good possibility of selling the Metropolis House on Burton in the near future. True or false?
Well, I think that there's a, what is the question, that we're selling Burton Place?
Yes.
So there is no, right now we're looking at evaluating Burton Place. We're looking at it as a structure to make sure it's safe. I have task forces that were assigned the role of looking at what we have as an asset, as a building. Does it meet our needs? Is it safe for our people to be in there? I mean, when I got there, I'll give you an example. When I first walked into the building, they gave me a tour of the building. Like I said, I hadn't been there ever. One of the things that I found was that our employees were working in the basement. Okay, we didn't have it's a home. First of all, who has been to the Metropolis home? Who has been to the Burton Place? So some of you, not everyone. It's an old mansion in one of the nicest areas of Chicago, downtown Chicago. It's a very old building. It's a building that we haven't really done a good job to maintain it and so forth, but it's a beautiful area. And it was built to be a home. Okay, so it has a second floor which would have been 4 bedrooms, which were converted into 2 offices and 2 bedrooms. The Metropolitan, the blessed memory, used to live there, as you know, and his nephew used to live with him. So His Eminence had an office and a bedroom, his nephew had an office, and the Chancellor had an office. The rest of our staff worked downstairs in the basement, where when I saw the conditions, I got really upset, and I brought them upstairs. I got rid of the bedrooms and turned them all into office space, so that they at least have a semi-normal working environment. So after that, I looked around again, noticed some things, and so we have a task force that has been studying, evaluating with contractors, architects, to make sure that the space is safe, what we have on our hands. And what we'll do with the building in the future is it's going to be up to our Metropolis Clergy Lady Assembly. So we'll look at all options, but we're not looking at selling it at the moment.
Question from the crowd? I always ask that, by the way, when we do all the talking. Here's a question. Some of us in the lady are under the impression that we fall under the jurisdiction of the Metropolis of Chicago, who answers to the Patriarchate. What is the role of the Archdiocese as it pertains to the local parishes and to the Metropolis of Chicago?
So we are a Metropolis of Chicago. That is a specific eparchy, and the presiding hierarch of the metropolis is Metropolitan Nathaniel. Okay, I'm the chief shepherd of the parishes here of our metropolis. If you go to church on Sundays, my name is commemorated as Archbishop Nathaniel. Archbishop meaning the first bishop, correct? Not the title. My title is Metropolitan, of course. So this is a metropolis that I oversee. The parishes are accountable to me as the metropolitan. As a metropolis of Chicago, we're also part of the Archdiocese of America. So we have an eparchial synod of the United States. We have 9 metropolises within our United States. And we are all accountable to the ecumenical patriarch. My boss is the ecumenical patriarch. Okay? He is the person that I am accountable to, directly. And I commemorate him. And that's how you know that I'm accountable to him. Because our accountability is Eucharistic. Priests are accountable to me. That's why they commemorate me. And I am accountable to the ecumenical patriarch. That's why I commemorate him. It's Eucharistic, it's canon law, and it's Orthodox ecclesiology. And we have an Archdiocese of America, and we are to work with our Archbishop. I mean, we are to be in constant contact with him. We are to coordinate our efforts with him. I mean, we don't have a separate entity outside of our Archdiocese. We are to, all 9 of the metropolitans must work together. But at the end of the day, each of us is accountable to the Patriarch. The Patriarchal Synod elected each of us. That's also how you know who a bishop is accountable to. The Synod that elects him. So I don't know if I answered the question, but...
Scanning the crowd, looking for a hand.
Any more? You won't be afraid. Comment or a question?
A question.
Okay.
A question, please. In the future, if there is a question that the parishioner needs addressed, and it's addressed to you, will it come directly, will you address it, or will it go to a specific committee in the metropolis?
Well, I mean, I think, I get letters all the time from people. Sometimes it's a letter sharing information or stating something, and it's just a letter to me. Sometimes I respond, sometimes I don't, and I just take the letter and I reflect on what the person wrote. I also get emails from people that come into the metropolis. Some of the email, if they could be answered by someone else, immediately will be answered by someone else. I can't answer every single request or question that comes in. If it's something that I can only answer, I will answer. If it's something that I can delegate it to someone, they'll answer on my behalf, perhaps with the answer that I give them. Okay? If it needs to go to a committee, we go to committee. Yeah.
As far as if I understood, are we going to be getting like an annual financial statement from the metropolis? Is that how it is? How does your financial statement from the metropolis, will it come to the parish annually?
So what we're doing right now, so you understand, we are conducting an audit. Okay, so you will get the financial situation of the metropolis for the last 3 years, 15, 16, 17, okay? That will be made public. That will be online, and we'll think about how else we'll share that information. every year we will have our budget available online and we'll share it with parishes. There'll be, the budget will be actual budget, where we projected and where we are. And if we have to provide financials, I don't know what other financials.
Budget is
yeah, a budget. That's a budget. First of all, the budget of our metropolis ought to be a budget that is approved by the Clergy Lady Assembly. Okay, it's your budget. It's our budget. It's not my budget. If we hopefully are not exceeding our budget and we have the revenue to support our budget, so we're not over budget, right? But this, at the 2019 Clergy Lady Assembly, we will present a budget for consideration. You will know ahead of time what the budget is. We don't want to go in keeping you in the dark. Otherwise, it doesn't work. You need to know what we hope to raise and where we hope to spend it and invest the money. So that will be there.
And last, I'd like to say, in your survey, you had opportunities. I think you are our opportunity. I believe you are. You are our opportunity. In faith, with God's help and the responsibility of all of us. All of us are here, not too many, but we have a responsibility to get out to the people and let them know there is a leader now that, as long as they get on board, because if we don't get on board, we don't get things corrected. And if we don't get on board, we have no room to complain. But I feel you are our opportunity. Thank you.
Well, the only thing I will say to you with that is, if you ever see me becoming like this, you need to tell me that. No, I think, I will say this, one of the most seductive things that I've seen as a bishop is power and authority, and the difference between the two. The difference between authority and responsibility and power. Technically speaking, a metropolitan, a bishop, isn't accountable not even to a synod, according to the canons. There's nothing that it can come in and step in unless it's teaching heresy or violating certain rules. And that is very, very problematic for me as an individual, as a new hierarch, to know that essentially I don't have to care what anyone has to say. But I care enough to ask you all for help if you see that we're doing something wrong. If you see that I've made a mistake and I'm blind to it, that you have the courage to come and say that in a loving way, hopefully, and you don't crucify me. But because I know that I will make mistakes, I know that I will let people down. That's part of being a leader, is learning from mistakes and making difficult decisions that many people won't want to follow sometimes. We have fathers of the church that have done that, and this is my job to be a father of our church today. So, I kindly and I encourage you, if you see that what I do or what I've done, decisions that I've taken as a metropolitan are off somehow, tell me. I'll consider it. I'll think about it. If you don't say anything, if you do remain silent, if you kind of just come along for the ride, then, not only I won't say you shouldn't complain, but we're not really going to get to where we have to go together. We're going to get lost together.
Okay, now I'm really confused. 9 metropolises. What is the Archbishop of New York? Or is there really an Archbishop of New York, and what does he do?
Well, there is an Archbishop of America.
Of America.
Yeah. The Archbishop of America is the presiding bishop of our eparchial synod. Okay, he is the first bishop here in the United States. He is the person that coordinates us. He's the person who oversees the synod. But he also is responsible for his direct district, like I'm responsible for my metropolis. He's not responsible for Chicago. He's not responsible for the metropolis of Pittsburgh. And he's not responsible for the metropolis of Atlanta. He's responsible for his direct archdiocesan district and ensuring that we're all coordinating and working together. So he is the president of our synod. He's the Archbishop of America. He's supposed to be the glue that keeps us together, right? That's his responsibility, and that's a huge responsibility. So, although he cannot come in and reassign priests in the metropolis, he can't just arbitrarily assign a priest in my metropolis. Only I can do that. He is responsible for coordinating efforts with us, the metropolitans, and making sure that we're working together, making sure that we're not deviating from decisions that we take collectively as a synod. So, and when we do, he's responsible. I mean, it's a challenge. He has brothers, he has peers, and he has to help us get back on track when we're off. So that's his responsibility. Does that make sense?
Okay, but you don't report to him, and literally he really can't tell you what to do. He can only help you or suggest or recommend for you all to work together. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that is the way, I mean, really, that is also the way, for example, my relationship and with the patriarch. He can't reassign a priest in the metropolis of Chicago. That's not his responsibility. That's not his area of oversight. He's responsible for coordinating all of the metropolitans around the world. He is our primate. So, I mean, if I can think about it discuss it in different terms, he's not micromanaging. His job isn't to micromanage. We've been delegated authority, okay, and we're responsible for the region that we've been given. This is my home. This is my metropolis. I'm the shepherd. I'm responsible for this flock. When I do something that deviates from the faith, that's when I can get called in, for sure. But the patriarch isn't going to come in and say to me, reassign this priest, put him there, take that deacon, make him a priest. Okay? And neither is the archbishop. So it doesn't take anything away from the archbishop or the patriarch from not being able to do that. Our church doesn't have micromanagers. They have local shepherds.
Okay, in baseball terms, we've entered the bottom of the ninth. We have about 10 minutes left. So I have two questions here, unless somebody from the crowd.
Grand Slam, ninth inning, Cubs.
Yeah. Look for the vote. Look for the vote. How many years has the Archdiocese not sent the required amount back to the Chicago Diocese?
None. I mean, the Archdiocese has, in terms of the national allocation and national ministries assessment, we've received everything that is due to us. There isn't anything owed to the metropolis of Chicago. And as there isn't anything owed to any of the metropolises around the country, the Archdiocese is current with its own responsibilities.
This should be a quick one. Can church on Sundays be held at a different time to engage the youth?
Yeah, I think the youth have no problem getting up. They get up to go to their sporting events. Look, liturgy is always done in the morning at the rising of the sun. I don't know what time would make sense for coming up with different timing of liturgy. I don't think is going to solve the problem with our youth. Our young people are busy, or they're not interested, or they're taken and brought somewhere else by their parents, or they're in church. I mean, there aren't that many options. If they're not going to be able to come to church at 9 or 10 o'clock, chances are they won't be able to come at 11 or 12 or 1 o'clock. So I don't know that timing is the issue with our young people in church. It might be one of the issues, but I don't think it's the main issue.
Okay, last chance for a question.
The last question is always the toughest.
I have a quirky question. I asked a question over there earlier, still Christine Callahan. During Holy Week, during Pascha last year, maybe I hadn't eaten enough, but I started having a thought that didn't make sense to me. I'm hoping you can clarify it for me, and maybe it was just theological confusion on my part. But doesn't Jesus say to the thief, "Truly you will be with me this day in heaven"? Is that how? Isn't? But he's not going to be that day in heaven. He's going to Hades for 3 days, and then he's going to come back and see the Marys and see the disciples, and then he ascends into heaven. So he's not really going to see him that day in heaven. And I don't know if I'm just splitting hairs or if there's some significance to that, that even though Jesus was in Hades, he was in heaven, he's everywhere. I don't know.
It's good that you thought about that question.
Well, I wish I didn't. I wish I didn't. I'd rather just be paying attention in church.
What is the prayer that we read when we sense the altar table, Deacon? Τάφος σωματικός, ενάδει μεταψυχής, εν παραδείσο μεταλλιστού, and θρόνο μετα πατρός. What is it? So, I mean, the question that you're asking basically has to do with the person of Christ. Is he fully God or is he not? And that's something that the church has struggled with. You're not the only one who's thought of that question. How can Jesus, who is the Son of God, who is God, how can he be nailed on the cross? And how can he be in Hades? And how can he actually be with the Father? And is there a time that the Son is never with the Father? And is there a time that he's never in paradise? And so there's this beautiful little prayer that it's a juxtaposition of time, and how time doesn't make sense when you're talking about the Son of God, who happens to be in the world at that moment because he was born. He was really born. It wasn't a optical illusion. It wasn't fake. It wasn't some person who stood in the place of the Son of God. It was Jesus who was in time. And yet, while he's on the cross and he's in the cave, he's also in Hades, he's also in paradise with the thief, and he's with the Father forever, eternally. So he's able to do all of this because he is the Son of God. Understand? It doesn't make sense to us because we're thinking 3 days, he's got to be 3 days only in Hades. And if he's only in Hades, how can he be with the Father? Well, if he's not with the Father, he's not God. But if he's not in Hades, then there's no real resurrection. There's no real lifting of those who were in shackles. So he's able to do all of that. And that's the beauty of the God-man, Christ, the Christ event. That he goes beyond the limits of time or what we understand and experience time. So he wasn't lying to the thief. Okay? Yeah.
Okay, the last question is actually
I hope I didn't miss that theologically. I have all the theologians over here.
The last question is actually from me. And, I was at the Greek Heritage Night at the White Sox, and your first pitch was kind of, could have been better. So are you practicing your first pitches?
Listen up.
And you'll have an opportunity.
I would have made the nun look really bad if I was wearing my cassock up there, I'm telling you. You saw that Catholic nun? I actually have a really good cutter. But they didn't let me, loosen up. They just got me up there and said, throw the ball. Don't excited to you.
Well, thank you, Your Eminence, for coming to Maryville and hosting. I just want to say a quick thank you. Thank you to South Bend. I know you guys came the longest, and plus you're an hour ahead, so when you go back, it'll be a little
That's right. You're the parish that we have the time change, eh? Before we go, I just, wrapping up the listening tour, this has been, for me, an eye-opener. I've learned a lot over the past 3 months. I've gotten to see people more than I probably would have ever in many years. I probably would not have sat with you all for 2 hours and looked at you and listened to you if we didn't do this. I want to thank all those who helped put this together, my staff, the Metropolis Council members, all the priests throughout the Metropolis, the parishes that hosted us on these 12 listening tours, the fathers who brought their parishioners to these events, the people who have come out on sometimes Friday night, on a work night like this, tomorrow you have work. It means a lot to me that you're putting time aside to spend a few hours with your Metropolitan. It really does mean a lot. You're always in my thoughts and prayers. It'll take me a while to learn your names, but please know that I'm praying for you all the time. I mean, you're my family. I'm your father, you're my children, and I take that very seriously. I've been given a beautiful gift from God that's at the same time a tremendous responsibility that I don't take lightly. So please keep me in your prayers. Pray for my speedy recovery from my condition. And I look forward to coming to your churches, Father, to celebrate with you in the near future. So again, thank you very much.
I just want to say a few thank yous because during this event, there's a lot of people. It's not a one-man show. There's a lot of people that helped. Everybody from taking the notes to the ladies from North who did all the refreshments in the room. The parish council and volunteers to help pass the mics and sign-up tables. And I just want to wish everybody thank you for coming. Drive safely. We'll see you all on Sunday.